Hi, Gemma here from Calligraphy Gems. This is my third annual plan with me, so I will be setting out my bullet journal for the year of 2022. Now, I haven't been as active on YouTube recently. I guess I've been feeling in a bit of a funk with YouTube, but I feel like doing the December plan with me and the annual plan with me is a bit of a tradition, so that's why I really wanted to get this out. And I always really enjoy the process of setting up a new year. I find it quite therapeutic to get a nice fresh start, and yeah, so let's get into it. So first things first is I wanted to add some additional columns to my journal for this year in terms of like a monthly overview. And the reason why I did this is because the last couple of years I've just used one page for every kind of date, but there wasn't actually that much room in there to add stuff in. So this year I really wanted to include each month separately. And for those who haven't watched the video yet, so they're not aware, I am moving into a square journal this year, which gives me more space to try out new designs. So I decided not to include all 12 months in one view. I did it over 4 pages. So I did 3 months on the left and 3 months on the right, flipped the page, and then I did the same again. For the headers, I used a bouncy brush calligraphy style, and then to separate each month, I used my pink pentel brush pen and just created a simple line using that. At first, I wasn't going to draw lines in the middle of the pages to separate March and April, because I thought, oh, they're on separate pages, I won't need it, but then I felt it looked a bit off balance, so I added these in as well. I wasn't sure whether to stick with just the pink lines or to add stuff in, but I was worried if I added stuff in it would look cluttered, but in the end I decided to add just another line and then some gold dots. So the line, I used another pentel brush pen, this one was in a pale pink colour, and then for the dots I used the Zebra Doodlers, they're gel pens essentially, and I just created little dots going down the line, and I thought this looked really nice. It was a very simple pattern to create, so it didn't take me very long, but I really liked how this looked. I then added each day of the month down in each column. I didn't record all of this because I thought it would be a bit boring to watch, but yes, I added it to every single month, and here it is. Moving on, the next page is a period tracker. So this is something I've included for the last several years, and in my opinion it's an absolute essential. So this is just a way obviously for me to keep track of my period. And then because I have a larger square journal this year, I wanted to try a slightly different layout. So I would have the calendar on the left, and then on the right hand side I wanted to track some of my symptoms. So this could be really helpful when you notice you're experiencing some random side effects or random symptoms that you might not necessarily associate with different times of the month, but by tracking some of my symptoms a couple of years ago, I realised that I tended to suffer with insomnia at certain parts of the month, and it just I was able to piece the information together, and now I know to prepare if I'm going to have some insomnia. In terms of how I laid out the calendar, I did 4 rows. Each month had a box for where the month would be. So I alternated between like the pale pink and a bright pink. Now when I was creating this, I felt like the box on the left hand side looked a little bit shorter, but instead of doing the smart thing and counting how many boxes was included, I decided to complete the whole thing, including adding the dates, and then I realised that I had made a mistake. So I actually made a couple of mistakes. The first was that when I referenced a calendar for January, I was using a Sunday to Saturday calendar, and I never ever used that format. So I ended up with the wrong date layouts. But then it was only once I reached April that I actually noticed that the dates were the boxes on the left hand side column were only 6 boxes wide, and I was so frustrated at this point because I knew it would bug me, but I didn't want to completely wipe out the dates that I had created. So what I did to try to rectify this is on the left hand side there was a little bit of room, so I extended the headers to try extend out the calendar on the left hand side. For the months of January and April, I just left the dates as is rather than try to correct them to get them to align with the correct days, because I know from experience that whenever I try to correct something, I end up making it look far worse, so I decided to leave it as is. In terms of the calendar boxes, I initially planned to outline them. So outline the header box and outline where the calendar box would be. But I decided to wait and see until after I'd filled out the numbers. And I'm actually really glad that I didn't add a box around them. I quite like the look of it without an outline. I initially planned to add a wavy or a few wavy lines between the calendar and the symptoms column, but I actually decided after filling it out that it would look too clumsy and too cluttered, so I ended up deciding to not add a line to separate those two. On the right hand side page, I added a comfort zone column and also a rainy day column. So the comfort zone is something that I've added in my last journal and I really appreciated having it. So anytime I push myself out of my comfort zone or do something that I feel has stretched me, I add it to this list, and it's just a nice way to reflect on how much I've grown throughout the year. And then the rainy day column is a list of kind of activities that I can do when I'm feeling bored or restless. So these aren't just fun activities on here, they're also household chores. And I know that sounds boring, but if I'm feeling restless, sometimes the process of tidying a cupboard or giving the kitchen a deep clean or something, it could be quite therapeutic. So I added a mix of different activities in there. I didn't show the activities I listed in this video, but for example, some of the activities I listed were play a board game, watercolor painting, journal, and then some of the chores or some of the physical space decluttering included tidying my stationery cupboard or cleaning the kitchen or give everywhere a hoover. It's just little things like that. And then in terms of separating the two, I did the same kind of pattern that I used on the calendar or the monthly overview spread. So I did the 2 lines, one in bright pink, one in pale pink, and then added the gold dots. Moving on to the next page, I had a celebrating wins page. So this is specific to my business. So this year, or for 2021, I had 2 journals. One was my personal journal where I tracked my daily life, but I also set quarterly goals and things like that for my business. And then I had a day-to-day kind of planner, organizer style notebook. But it was a bit of a pain to have 2 separate notebooks at all time, and I felt like things were getting missed or duplicated. So this year I really wanted to incorporate it into one space. So I have incorporated more business style annual layouts this year. So this one is celebrating wins, and this is just anytime I have a business win, writing it down so that I can reflect on the year to see what wins I have made in my business. And then on the right hand side, I've added a smaller column of how to celebrate, because something I'm not particularly great at is actually celebrating those wins, and I really should make more of an effort to do that. And having kind of a ready-made column of these ideas of ways that I can celebrate is just a nice idea, in my opinion. I started with the right hand side page because I was conscious that with using the gold gel pen on the previous pages that it might smudge. So I didn't want to apply pressure on the left-hand side page straight away, which is why I start on the right-hand side pages. Then on the left-hand side page, I added my Calligraphy Gems 2022 Goals and Wishes tracker. So this is where I will plan out my quarterly goals. So each quarter I really like to, set some goals for myself. I think a quarter is a nice check-in point to set goals with yourself. So I also plan to use the space that's above the boxes that I've added in to set out some general annual goals, and then I'm going to add in later like a stretch goal, like one goal that I would really love to achieve throughout the year. Now I haven't actually set my goals for this year, which is why the spread isn't fully filled out, but I might share those in a different video. And then in terms of how the spread looks, I felt like it looked a bit too black and white, so I added a pop of pink by just adding some more lines to the side of each quarterly box. Moving on to the next pages, again I start to fill out the right hand side first. So this is my business revenue tracker, and this is just a way to get an idea of what my business revenue looks like throughout the year. Now I do have more accurate readings, like a spreadsheet that I use separately for this, but this is just a nice simple reflection / overview. So on the left hand side column I have the amount of revenue, and then underneath I have the months of the year. So I've added a little gap between each quarter so that I can get a feel for what each quarter looks like separately. Now I used a brush pen to add not only the title but the numbers on the left hand side as well, and I'm not actually that keen on how this looked. I think the brush pen was a bit too thick for the numbers, and actually I struggled to fit in one of the numbers, and it wasn't my favourite, but hey ho, it's the first time creating it, so there's bound to be a couple of mistakes. Now usually, in honesty, I'm a bit lazy to use a ruler, but because my spreads had a lot of grids this time, I decided to use a ruler, and I think that was definitely the correct call, especially as these are my annual spreads. I didn't want it to look really messy, otherwise it would probably bug me, as I would be looking on it on a fairly regular basis. On the right hand side I added a notes and goals column. So this is just a place for me to add notes. Say if I have a particularly good month or a slow month, I can add a note to kind of what I think happened. But also this is a place where I can set financial goals for myself. So if I want to reach a certain goal for a quarter or something, I could potentially add it there. And again, I separated the chart from the column using this pink kind of pattern style. I think the chart doesn't look that nice, but as the months go on, I will be filling it out using probably the three colours I've used for the pattern. So bright pink, pale pink and gold, just to add more colour to this spread. In terms of how the chart works, for those that are interested, obviously this isn't a specific number that I'll be adding, but just a general overview. So if I reached £250, I would create the line to the top of the 250 box. If I reached, say, £1,000, I would add the bar to the top of the £1,000 box. So it's just a very simple chart. Not very fancy, but I didn't want anything really complex. I just wanted a simple overview. Although this is a business revenue tracker, you could adjust this to your own needs. So this could be used for like a savings tracker, for example. And then on the right hand side, you could, write down what you want to save for. Now on the left hand side is a social media log. So this is something I added to my 2021 spread, I think after I had done my planner with 3 videos, so you might not have seen it. So essentially it is a way for me to see how my social media channels are doing each month. And what I tended to include on there was the number of followers at the end of the month, and also the number of posts at the end of the month. So this was a way to see how I was growing in relation to how much I was actually engaging on that platform. So I found that quite helpful because, for example, I think, oh, this channel has been a bit slower. Oh, I've not done anything on it. That's probably why. So it's just a nice kind of simple overview. And I know that followers is kind of a, what's the word? I guess like a shallow metric, but it does feel nice to keep an eye on these things and to see some growth. Even if it's not dramatic, it's just nice to know that the work I'm putting into these platforms is coming back, even if growth is slow. In terms of how I decorated this spread, on the left hand side I did the initial of each month and I alternated between pale pink and bright pink. I was very lucky because of the mishap with the calendar on the period tracker. I had a double check through here and I'd actually missed a month out, so I'm very lucky that I checked and I was able to add a month in before I actually filled the entire thing out. There wasn't much room to add a title, so I didn't bother. I know what it's for, so I don't really need to add a title. And then in terms of listing the columns, I have Facebook, Instagram, my Facebook group, my YouTube channel, Pinterest, which I don't really use, and then my email list, which is a new addition to this tracker. What I'll do as well before I start the year is underneath each of these columns, I'll add where I am at the start of the year, just so I'm aware of, the overall position from last year to the end of 2022 once that's finished. Onto the final page, I have a quote, and that is, "I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring." And that is a quote by the late David Bowie. And I really like this quote. I genuinely don't know where my life is going or my business or anything, but I know that it will be interesting whatever happens. So I'm looking forward to see what the year ahead has for me. So I created this in my typical bounce calligraphy style. I kept it very simple. I didn't add any doodles. I just wanted the quote to stand out in its own rights. And then I added the word promise in pink because I thought that was a nice touch. Initially, I wanted the quote page to be at the front of the journal, but because of the layout of the journal, the first page was on the left-hand side, and I wanted all of my monthly overview spreads to be like side by side, if that makes sense. So I wanted January to start on a left-hand side page, which is why I did the quote at the end of my annual trackers rather than at the beginning. Okay, so that's the end of my 2020 Plan With Me video. I actually really enjoyed how a lot of these spreads looked. I obviously made a couple of mistakes which could have, knackered the whole thing, but actually I think I worked it out and I think it looks nice anyway. Initially I was considering a more neutral colour palette, but actually I wanted a pop of colour because my journal for 2022 is dark and my last couple of journals have been on the darker side, and I just really wanted that splash of colour so that when I opened my journal straight away, it was nice and colourful. I really liked how simple the pattern was that I added to these, but it just added a nice pretty touch. I just really liked how it worked out. If you enjoy journaling videos, I do have other Plan With Me videos, including a couple of other annual setup videos, so definitely go check those out after this video, and thank you very much for watching. Bye!